Going to call to order. Today is Thursday, May 16, 2019, fiscal year 20 operating budget hearings of the Budget and Finance Committee and the Metro Council. Before us, we have MDHA. We have Mr. Matt Wiltshire. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. You can walk us through your budget. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for giving us this time. As Councilwoman Vercher said, my name is Matt Wilshire. I am the Chief Strategy and Intergovernmental Affairs Officer for the Metropolitan Development and Housing Agency. Let me open by saying that it is incredibly gratifying to see so many folks in attendance here today wearing MDHA red and clearly supporting the work that MDHA does to provide for affordable housing. No? Okay. Too soon? All right. I think affordable housing is something that we can all agree is important for all of Nashvilleians.
Yeah. Mr. Wiltshire, go ahead with your presentation. I want to remind the citizens in the chamber, we have a level of decorum here at the courthouse. This is very serious for the Budget Committee to hear presentations for respective departments. Go ahead, Mr. Wiltshire. Yes,
and let me apologize for that levity at the outset of my presentation. I wanted to open with what the mission statement of MDHA is. I think this organization has had some confusion about it from time to time, so we want to at least set the table with this, and then we'll talk specifically about the budget implications. So the mission statement of MDHA is to create quality, affordable housing opportunities, to support neighborhoods, to strengthen communities, and to help build a greater Nashville. And this organization has been doing that for about 80 years. There are four main components of MDHA. The first is affordable housing. The 6,272 units are owned and operated units. As this body knows, on March 29th, MDHA completed the RAD process, converting ownership of the properties that we operate from the federal government to MDHA. And those are the owned and operated units. It does include, to date, a few workforce and market rate units, and there will be more of those created under the Envision process and the Under One Roof plan. In the upper right-hand corner is rental assistance. These are vouchers that are provided. The 6522 actually includes 121 vouchers that are used for housing outside of Davidson County, but the other 6,401 vouchers are providing housing to residents of Davidson County. These are assistance. This is rental assistance in private apartments provided to citizens through funding that is managed by MDHA. In the lower left-hand corner, the Community Development Organization, which provides grants to things such as housing for persons with housing opportunities for persons with AIDS, provides community development block grants, including one bill that's under consideration on Tuesday to provide some funding for a park on Jefferson Street, and provides various funding components for housing preservation and rehabilitation. And in the lower right-hand corner, urban development does a few things. Low-income housing tax credits, which come before this body, which provide tax credits for pilots, property tax abatements to affordable housing developers who provide actually 3,400 affordable housing units in Davidson County via pilots and other tax credits and other assistance that they've received. That's in 15 pilots that have been completed over the last several years since this body instituted that program. Urban development also manages the tax increment financing program and conducts various other development initiatives. MDHA, as an example, was the entity that built the Skirmerhorn, built Nissan Stadium, and has constructed a parking garage on the Avenue of the Arts. This is to just put this in a little bit of context. The Under One Roof initiative that Mayor Briley announced on March 26th is a $750 million plan for affordable housing over the next 10 years. You can see the three components of that, $150 million to the Barnes Fund, and I'll recognize Hannah Davis, who's here, who manages that out of the mayor's office, that provides gap financing to nonprofit affordable housing developers. The plan is to increase that by 50% over the next 10 years. And then a $250 million call to action for the private sector to both make philanthropic donations, but also to make investments in affordable housing. But the piece that relates to MDHA is that first component. The plan is for $350 million of bond funding, so not related to the operating budget, although there, of course, would be debt service of those of that lending, of that borrowing, that would go to create 1,000 deeply affordable units, accelerate the Envision process, and overall create 5,000 units. So in total, this initiative is projected to create 10,000 additional housing units over the next 10 years. MDHA does a bunch of things for its own accord, but also does them very well in partnership with a number of private entities. Certainly utilizes HUD, utilizes THDA, but I wanted to highlight this one development project that is going on at the parking lot of Operation Stand Down on Edge Hill and 12th Avenue South. There's actually a groundbreaking for this, and I want to make sure to invite certainly all the members of the audience, the council, to that. It's at 10 a.m. on May 22nd. This is a 39 apartment affordable housing development for veterans, many of whom have been experiencing homelessness. There will actually be 2 market rate units in this as well, and you can see the project financing on this and shows the variety of financing sources that we use, including a donation of $500,000 from Mike Kerb, but grants from Tennessee Housing Trust Foundation, a mortgage, and then a low-income housing tax credit is providing a piece of the equity. So please mark your calendar for May 22nd to come to Operation Stand Down for the groundbreaking of this project. So this is the main slide of the presentation, and let's talk about the impact on the Metro operating budget of MDHA. The first point is the very first bullet, that there is 0 direct operating subsidy of MDHA from the Metro operating budget. 0. The MDHA does, in fact, pay $312,650 in property taxes to the Metro budget. And in addition to that, there are another number of operating investments made by MDHA in the operating budget. Now, I want to be careful on this. These aren't necessarily line items that show up, but a number of these things are items that we believe, if MDHA were not providing for these investments, that they would potentially be expenses of the Metro operating budget. So the first is actually payments to Metro Nashville Police Department. MDHA has a task force with the police, and we pay for increased police patrols at a number of our properties, and so that is actually compensation paid by MDHA to the Metro Nashville Police Department. Some of these other items, such as the summer employment for youth opportunities, that's primarily Opportunity Now, but includes a number of other summer youth programs. I believe it's 20 or 22 summer youth programs across the county that are funded primarily by CDBG funds that are administered by MDHA. But we also provide for the Homeless Management Information System that the Homeless Impact Division utilizes, and then there are emergency rent and utility payments that go towards individuals experiencing homelessness. So these are some of the investments that MDHA makes through other funding sources. I want to be clear about that. These are sort of federal funds administered by MDHA that pay for services that citizens of Nashville receive. And then the last number on the page is actually, it's not operating, it's capital, but this is construction of neighborhood public facilities, things like sidewalks, bus stops, and the Pocket Park on Jefferson Street that I referenced earlier. So from an operating budget impact, there clearly are many services that are received by residents of the affordable housing provided by MDHA, garbage collection, schools, water, which I guess the water is paid for, but a number of services. And so those expenses aren't reflected here. Those are services that the citizens who live in MDHA housing receive from the city, and so those obviously have a tremendous impact on the operating budget. But in terms of sort of direct payments, I think it's important to note that Metro government, before we started talking about the under one roof 2029, Metro government does not provide any operating dollars to, and still does not provide any operating dollars to MDHA. So with that, Madam Chair, that's the conclusion of my remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions that you all have.
Thank you so much. We'll be recognizing Budget and Finance Committee members first, and then Metro Council members thereafter. Councilman Cooper at large.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Appreciate your presentation, Matt, very much. Part of the Budget Finance Department's presentation to us was the increase in TIF loans and the interest payment that MDHA awards, and how that has gone up 25% year to year to $30 million of tax revenues, of which a fair share of that comes from schools, the famous 777 account. That seemed to surprise people, how much that went up in 1 year, the $7.5 million, which is coming out of the operating budget. Is that expected to continue at the same rate?
So I believe that the TIF study committee is making a presentation on the 20th, and they'll get into much more detail on this. But there have obviously been a number of TIF loans that have been given to developers in order to induce development in the city. And the exact amount of the incremental taxes generated by those projects, which then fund the loans that were used to help create them, has a projection. I don't know exactly the amount that it's going to go up next year, but my understanding is that it will be increasing.
But the school's portion of that tax revenue would be about 42%?
Well, the schools portion of, schools represents about 41 or 42% of the budget. Of the overall
of the property
operating budget.
Taxes collected and put over to the TIF loan would be about 42% of the $30 million.
Sure.
All right. In a separate question, I noticed this marvelous curve, Victory Hall, using over $5 million of LIHTC 9% money. What is the total allocation of 9% money to Davidson County in a year?
Over which time period?
Well, in any year.
Oh, I actually don't know the amount in a particular year. I'd have to go talk with the folks at THDA about that.
But that is using a fair amount of our very valuable 9% LIHTC money.
So I want to be very careful talking about sort of the LIHTC policies and procedures. Again, those are dictated by THDA, who administers that. But my understanding of the QAP, the sort of rules about who qualifies and which programs qualify for that, actually has a set aside for housing authorities that have converted to RAD. And so to a certain extent, my understanding is most of the 9% tax credits received by MDHA to advance affordable housing come from this set aside and aren't necessarily competing with other projects within Davidson County. But I don't want to speak about their policies and procedures. I'm certainly not an expert in that yet.
Thank you. I would just appreciate the perspective of how much of the 9% money in Davidson County do we actually get and we qualify for, because that's extremely valuable, and I'm grateful to the state in making that 9% money available, because it's certainly a big tool in our toolbox.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you so much, Councilman. Councilman Pulley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very briefly, when you talk about the $750 million new initiative, and you went over the $250 million private partnership, you indicated that was a call to action. So can you give us an idea of what that looks like? Do you have any private partnerships recruited, and what your plan is moving forward to secure that money?
Absolutely. So we are in conversations with actually a number of entities. I will say there is tremendous interest in what's going on in Nashville right now, and it's a challenge just to answer the phone and have all the meetings. But preliminarily, our expectation is that the $250 million, or however much it is, if more or less, will come from three components, although I'm certainly open to having conversations about other ideas. The first is philanthropic donations. We believe, and have spoken with both companies and individuals who are interested in contributing, and many folks do that today. Let me be clear, Habitat for Humanity and the other nonprofit affordable housing developers receive really important donations from individuals and corporations today. But we would look to increase that and create some mechanisms for folks to be able to contribute in a confident way towards affordable housing. So that's going to be a component of it. We have also spoken, and I've I've spoken to this body about increasing additional development in affordable housing, whether it's through affordable housing REITs or through additional investments by for-profit or nonprofit affordable housing developers. There are a number of tools that we are examining, and so there are, I would say, a number of very advanced conversations with parties who are interested in investing additional dollars in affordable housing in Nashville. But I don't have, I apologize, I don't have an announcement today that, XYZ is making this investment.
I understand that. I just wanted to hear your comprehensive plan for securing all that, and I think you answered it. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Pulley. And to date, since the announcement of March 26th, we only have a $100,000 donation. Is that correct?
I don't believe that's correct. Are you referring to Nashville grad, or I'm not sure.
I was confused. That's Nashville grad. You're
Yes.
right. Okay. So we have 0 for Under One Roof so far?
Correct. Yeah, we haven't even set up the vehicle yet. So
Okay.
yes.
Thank you, Mr. Wishaw. Councilwoman Dow.
Thank you, Matt. I wanted to ask a couple of questions about the $750 million bond. I know that you mentioned that this is a bond going through MDHA, and you talked to have an impact on our general budget. I want you to tell me a little bit more about that as far as the debt service go. I know that we talked about issuing some type of housing bond, but I'm curious as to how we're going to meet the debt service. Like, where are those dollars coming from?
Sure. So the $750 million is the overall plan. The piece of it that relates towards debt issuance is the $350 million that would be coming to MDHA. That would be comprised of roughly $35 million a year. At least that's the proposal. Certainly, based upon the projects that are ready for construction, it may be $30 million one year and $50 million the next and $20 million the next. But the idea is that over 10 years, there would be $350 million invested using general obligation bonds from Metro government to invest in affordable housing. And so it wouldn't be even $350 million year one, it would ramp up over time. So in year 11, there would be an incremental $350 million of debt. And so the debt service on that, I don't know precisely what it might be. Someone from the finance department may be able to answer that. But if it's roughly 8%, including the principal and interest repayments, you're probably talking about something like $28 million of operating budget impact in 11 years from investing in this affordable housing. The source of that, I think, that's something that this body would have to determine. It would come out of the Metro operating budget. It would be an investment by this city in all the things that we've talked about, but it would be an investment by this city in that on an operating budget basis.
So, okay, that's what I was interested in. It'll come out of our general operating funds.
Yes, ma'am.
Because I think one of the concerns we've seen over the last few years is the increased debt service obligation. So even though a lot of people in the public have noticed that even though we're collecting more revenues, our debt obligations have also increased. So every year we're paying more and more to our debt service. So through this program that you're proposing, we'll be increasing our debt level. And also the debt service, we'll be responsible for paying that out of our general fund. Just the regular taxpayer funds.
Yeah, I want to be very careful. There is a waterfall of how much debt, and I think 11 years from now, and I don't know the number, someone from the finance department may be able to answer, but based upon the current sort of repayment plan, I would guess that there's several hundred millions of dollars that will be extinguished of debt as well. And so we repay debt every year and we draw down debt. And that amount, as my understanding is, has increased. We've borrowed more than we've repaid each year for the last several years.
That's right. I just wanted to be clear about where the dollars came from as far as like repaying it, that it does come out of our general fund, and that's how we'll be paying it back, and that would be on our debt service. And you're right, we do borrow and we do pay back, but what's happened over the years, even as new debt roll off, we've gone back and increased the amount, so we end up with more debt. So I just wanted to be clear on that. Also, just one quick question on the veteran housing that you're proposing. I know that we have a shortage in the city of housing to home women veterans. Most of the housing we see house male veterans. So is this going to be co-ed and allow both men and women to reside under this new project?
I don't know I have not heard that question specifically, so I haven't ever heard that this would be single gender, but let me look into that and I'll get you the answer.
Okay.
I presume it would be open to all veterans, but I don't know that for certain. Let me get you that answer. I will do that.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Councilwoman Dow. Councilwoman Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. Mr. Wilshire, when you were answering Councilman Pulley's question about the under one roof, it reminded me regarding the private sector investment. I believe when you came to present to council, I asked for you to send me information about affordable housing REITs.
Yes.
And did you send that?
I believe I may have sent it to the finance team, but let me track that down. There are 8 or 9 that I listed, publicly traded and private. But
Okay, I'd appreciate it. It's
I'll
not
just send
something
it
that crossed
directly to
my
you.
desk or my inbox,
Yep,
so thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you, Councilwoman Henderson. Councilman Bettany.
Thank you, Chair. So, Matt, I have a couple of questions. And first of all, I wanted to thank you. There was a resident in my district that was kicked out of housing by MDHA, and you intervened, and so now she's back in. So I appreciate you looking into making sure that she was okay. Having said that, I wanted to ask you about the impact of this new statement by HUD that they are going to start enforcing removing children and families from HUD properties. And I don't know that we have any mixed families here where the children are born here and their parents may be undocumented. But the question is, what will be the policy if we are to enforce that rule by HUD to avoid that we create all these homeless American-born children in Nashville?
I don't feel equipped to answer that specifically. I'm just not well-versed enough in what the specific rules and regulations are. I will tell you that MDHA, to my knowledge, is not, MDHA, to my knowledge, is rigorously complying with all federal and state rules and regulations, and we comply with those. They obviously provide a significant amount of funding, but I am not aware of any special initiatives within MDHA to go sort of proactively seek out and seek to expel folks. I think that would be a really terrible situation for children who need to be focused on their education to all of a sudden be worrying about where they're going to sleep at night.
Thank you, Matthew, and Matt, sorry. And I have talked to the mayor's office about, I had some questions about the plan that I attended the groundbreaking. That was very exciting. I'm very excited about this proposal of investing all this money and resources in dealing with homelessness in the city. So I just wanted to see if you could give me the answers on some of those questions that I left. But I'm very psyched. I'm very excited, and I know you're the right person to move that forward. So good luck to you. Thank you.
That's very kind of you. I'll look into those questions on homelessness, and I will say in the 3 or 4 weeks that I've been over at MDHA, I'm really excited to be a part of that team. It's some really great, smart folks who are working really hard every day for Nashvillians.
That's it, Councilman Bettany.
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Councilwoman Weiner.
Thank you, Chair. I apologize for being a little bit late, so this may have already been asked, Matt. But can you share with me if there's been any research done, and if so, what the outcome was of the outcomes of other cities' housing trust programs in terms of units, in terms of being able to facilitate longevity to the fund, and how that's worked in other places?
Are you referring specifically to something like the Barnes Housing Trust Fund or to MDHA and the investments we're making there? I want to make sure I'm answering the question you're asking.
Okay, so for me, it's probably going to be a combination of both, because this under one roof is different than I think what anybody anywhere does.
Yes.
However, just in general terms, insofar as, you know, us looking at funding a housing initiative and that turning into actual units, what does that look like down the road? And maybe give us a little bit of a differential between the MDHA program and the Barnes Fund.
Absolutely, and I want to respect the time of all the audience, and this is, as you might imagine, an incredibly sort of long potential answer. What I will say is the units that we build at MDHA have permanent affordability. There will be a mix of units, and I want to be clear about that. The idea of deconcentrating poverty involves replacing all of the existing subsidized, deeply affordable units on a one-for-one basis, adding 1,000 additional units on top of the stock that we have today. But then there will also be a mix of workforce units, which are income restricted to folks making between 80 and 120% of area median income, and then market rate units. So the market rate units, of course, will float with the market, and that's the idea. But the affordability of the units that we build will be affordable forever. Forever. And so that is the initiative, and that's, I think, the permanent affordability. Ms. Davis can speak to the affordability period on projects that are funded by the Barnes Fund, 15 years, 20 years, longer commitments made by some of the entities. And I know on a number of the tax credit initiatives that were referenced earlier, those have a 15-year affordability period, although many times the owners of those projects choose to re-up for a second 15-year period. So they actually end up going 30 years, but the owners can opt out after 15 years.
That helps. I may get with you to get some more information.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. I did want to go back to the under one roof proposal, specifically the $150 million in operating funds for Barnes Fund. So again, depicted there as a 50% increase, but that is over 10 years with $5 more million each year. Is that correct?
That's the idea. As you know from looking at this budget, I'm sure. So the Barnes Fund received $10 million in each of the last two operating budgets, and it remains $10 million in this budget. Given the budget constraints and all of the demands of Metro government, there was a decision made to not increase it this year. And in addition to that, and again, Hannah can talk in more detail about this, the idea is that we want to give the affordable housing, nonprofit affordable housing development community time to ramp up and us to put the infrastructure in place to make sure that we're deploying the funds effectively. So we thought putting an additional $5 million in this year would be premature. But the idea, not the idea, the commitment of the mayor is that that would total $150 million. So since we're at $10 million in year one, it may be $14 million next year as we ramp up, but then would be 15, 16, 17 million in the years after that to total $150 million over 10 years.
Okay, but in this next year, then no additional money for Barnes?
Correct, yes. It remains at 10
$10
million, and I mean, I see all the folks supporting education here. We thought, given the budget constraints this year, was more important for that money to go to education than an increase in the Barnes Fund at this point. Okay, Hannah, if you could, I know in the last hearing related to MDHA and affordable housing, we spoke about the fact that the Barnes reporting for the last year or two was not updated online. Has that been updated at this point?
Yes. Use the microphone. For the viewing
Okay,
audience.
so I guess to Council Lady Weiner's
One moment,
question.
Councilwoman Henderson. We're going to
Yeah.
have her identify herself for the viewing audience.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Hannah Davis. I'm overseeing the Barnes Fund, and the annual housing report is available online. It has not been updated with this past cycle that was just finalized because those grant contracts haven't been finalized through council yet. We'll do, according to the original Barnes legislation, have an annual report available that's updated with those units once they're finalized through council.
Okay, great. But the preceding year that was previously, we were previously behind on that, we're now up to date on.
The
'Cause I'd understood from looking at the website that you did not have this year and understood it was in progress, but even the prior year was not reflected online last time I looked.
the report that's online right now that's available is currently up to date.
Okay, great. That's good to hear. And then if I could just ask the administration, so specifically $10 million a year in the last 3 years specifically for Barnes. But can somebody remind me, as it relates to the capital spending plan, have we specifically called out barns, or have we spoke more generally to affordable housing? Because I think there was some confusion around, where affordable housing dollars would be designated specifically to permanent supportive housing on North 2nd Avenue for our unhoused population. And then additionally, there's been some conversation about a really big number going towards the Baptist Sunday School building. And I think there were some community concerns that that would require a lot of abatement and, just be kind of a complicated project into which to put affordable housing dollars. So can you all, just so we understand the overall landscape, both MDHA, under one roof, what Barnes is doing, what capital dollars we have dedicated to affordable and where those are going to go. Can you speak to that? Is there money above Barnes specific?
Yes.
Okay.
So none of this relates to the MDHA and the operating budget specifically, but in brief, there was $25 million in each of the last two capital spending plans that was approved for affordable housing. Now, as you know, the Barnes Fund is gap financing for nonprofit affordable housing developers. These are nonprofit entities who are developing affordable housing. Because those assets would not be owned by Metro, they are ineligible for general obligation bond funding. The $25 million that was appropriated in the fall of 17 has been committed to building the project of 100, I think it may actually end up being more than 100, 120, I don't know exactly what the number will be, units of permanent supportive housing for individuals experiencing homelessness. That project, I believe the RFP, if it's not out yet, will be going out shortly, but that $25 million is committed to that. The $25 million for affordable housing that was approved in the capital spending plan this past fall, the initial commitment of that was to fund the acquisition of the Morris Memorial Building, which you're referred to as the Baptist Building. The option to acquire that building was 13.8, maybe 12.8 or 13.8 million. 12.8 million. And so that would be roughly half of the 25 million. If Morris Memorial Building is not utilized for affordable housing, and there has been some discussion and speculation about the relative cost of that, then those funds would not be eligible for the acquisition of the Morris Memorial Building. And if Metro were to acquire that building, that funding would have to come from somewhere else. If that funding is not used to acquire and rehabilitate or rehab, do whatever improvements to the Morris Memorial Building, that $25 million would be available for other investments. But until the Morris Memorial situation is resolved, there's no, that's where it's going right now.
So basically, 25 million and or 12.8 million that the city could today be applying to affordable housing is somewhat in limbo, whether or not we're going to engage in this transaction, or it's just
Yes.
it's just sitting there.
Well, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Like any project, right? It takes time to analyze the project and figure out if it's a good use or not. There's a study committee looking at it. My understanding is that they are going to report to the mayor shortly, and then there will be a discussion, and obviously any actual acquisition would come before this body. But yes, it is an opportunity to provide affordable housing within the core of the city that is currently being analyzed.
I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Does the administration or finance have a date certain on when the committee that's looking at that will have an answer? Because I think that relates or is implicated as far as our
Ms.
affordable
McGuire?
housing delivery.
Early June. I'm sorry.
Early June.
Early June.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. And then, Mr. Wilshire, you said the money for the Morris Building would come from somewhere else. Where would that somewhere else be?
Oh, you're way beyond I don't even know what the use of that building might be under those circumstances. So I guess it would depend upon what that might be, but
Okay.
Way beyond sort of my engagement.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Councilwoman Henderson. Councilwoman Porterfield.
Thank you, Chair. I did have one question regarding the Victory Hall that you spoke of in your presentation.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the rationale for having the 2 market units in the building?
Yeah, so it was part of the idea, and I think there may be more behind this than I'm equipped to articulate, but I think the idea is to have the funding enabled and allowed those 2 units, and it may be for folks who are working with homeless veterans and folks who can provide additional resources for them. But let me get the exact answer to that and follow up with you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other council members seeking recognition? Mr. Wiltshire, do you have any board members here?
I don't believe there are any.
Is the executive director here?
He is not.
Okay, thank you so much. That concludes your budget hearing.
Yes, ma'am.